Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. Be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord, and turn away from evil. It will be healing to your flesh and refreshment to your bones. Blessed is the one who finds wisdom, and the one who gets understanding. For the gain from her is better than gain from silver, and her profit better than gold. She is more precious than jewels, and nothing you desire can compare with her. Long life is in her right hand. In her left hand are riches and honor. Her ways are ways of pleasantness, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to those who lay hold of her. Those who hold her fast are called blessed. The Lord by wisdom founded the earth. By understanding he established the heavens. By his knowledge the deeps broke open, and the clouds dropped down the dew. My son, do not lose sight of these. Keep sound wisdom and discretion, and they will be for your life for your soul, and adornment for your neck. I want to start tonight by taking you back in your mind to maybe a movie that you may have seen. I'm not sure. Maybe it's a book you've read. I read the book before I actually knew it was a movie, and the movie and the book have been out a long time. I just didn't know about either of them until someone said, you should read this book. So I read the book, and then it turns out there was a movie. It was starring a guy named George Clooney. You might have heard of him, okay? So it was a significant movie. But the book is by Sebastian Junger. It is called The Perfect Storm. Has anybody read that book by chance, Perfect Storm? A couple people, okay, yeah. Really enjoyed it, really fascinating story. Not a story perhaps that is not enjoyable to read in the same way that some stories are, because you know the ending from the beginning. Now, I don't have to tell you the ending yet, but when you're reading it, you know the ending from the beginning because the author tells you at the outset. But it's a story about, let me ask you this. Who's seen the movie The Perfect Storm? Everybody knows the plot. Okay, good. In the movie and in the book, what you see is a group of 6 sword fishermen that go out into the Grand Banks off of Newfoundland, and they're sword fishing. I know nothing about fishing other than what I've read in this one book, okay? So just bear with me there. But they go sword fishing, very dangerous. In fact, this book, which became the movie, was largely the precursor for the interest in American entertainment of shows like The Deadliest Catch and things like that, because people got fascinated by this movie and by the book and thought about these fishermen that were out there doing very dangerous things, losing limbs, losing hands, fingers, whatever it is, all in the quest to, of course, make their money to survive. You know, it was their livelihood. Anyway, these 6 guys in like 1990 something, they go up and they're fishing and they have great success along the way. They're catching all sorts of swordfish. They're putting them down into the freezer area, and they get where they're going. They're about ready to come back, but they're thinking about doing a little bit more fishing. They start to discover though that the ice machine that is keeping all of these fish, these hundreds and hundreds of pounds of fish, cold enough that they don't spoil, that the ice machine, the refrigerator or the freezer is not working. And so they have to try to decide how they can save all this fish. And their solution, of course, is we need to get back as soon as we can. We just need to hop in or turn the ship around. They're in the ship. Turn the ship around and get back home. At the same time, though, they're getting news about a storm that's coming that is going to be a pretty significant storm. Now, as with any storm, it's hard to know exactly what it's going to actually be when it happens, but they were being warned this is a pretty significant storm, and so they had to make their decision. Do we let all these fish rot? Maybe we get evicted from our homes. We're not going to be able to make ends meet. This trip they were riding on actually turning some kind of profit because they only get paid if they bring back fish. Do we risk the loss of wealth and stay here, or do we guarantee the loss of our material gain and stay here, or do we risk our lives perhaps? Could be nothing, could be a big storm, and try to save our job in the sense of save our livelihood that we're going to be bringing home. As you might know from watching the movie or reading the book, they decide that they're going to try to get back home so that they can sell the fish, so that they can, make ends meet. And I just want you to start thinking about it in your mind. Did they make the wrong choice? Did they make the wrong choice? Now, the word wrong is a pretty important word. What I don't mean is, looking back now, would they have said, yeah, we should have stayed back? Of course they would. But I want to ask you, was there a moral reason why they should have stayed or they should have gone? Did they do something sinful by saying, we're going to try to make it back? Start chewing on that for a moment. As they begin to head out into the storm, what actually happens is basically like two hurricanes kind of pop up and converge on each other. The storm itself was referred to as a 100-year storm. And they say that the waves in this storm, now imagine being on, I don't know how many feet the boat was, but it's a pretty small boat. Imagine riding waves in excess of 100 feet. Can you imagine seeing a 100-foot wave coming at you? I mean, undoubtedly, their fight against the sea did not last terribly long. Their ship was simply not made to be able to withstand that. 100 feet of water coming at you, and then 70 feet, and then 80 feet, or whatever, however the waves were coming at you, and you're thinking, this is it. The captain of the ship, who's George Clooney. Mark Wahlberg's in the movie too, but his name is Billy Tynes, and he was last heard on the radio saying about the storm, she's coming on strong. And very soon the men were gone. In fact, rescuer passed away as well in that storm, but that's a story for another time. I find, though, in that story sort of a metaphor for the human experience, because the reality is those men were having to make a choice much like you make every single day. You make risk-reward choices every day, don't you? How many of you drove here? Okay, that was, you could raise your hand, but it's rhetorical. You get it, yeah, we all did, or nearly all of us. If you walked here, you also made a risk-reward choice. I don't know about Buford in Columbus. It's probably riskier to be walking, okay? The fact is we make choices every day whether or not we're going to get behind the wheel of a car and go to work, or whether or not we're going to go to this place or that place. We make choices on a daily basis about what we're going to eat and what we're not going to do. And there's always risks involved with all of our choices. And my guess is that to some degree, each of us feels like there is at times, maybe more profoundly than others, but there's this sea out there of choices, and we want to make the right choices. We want to do the right thing. We want to make the right risk-reward trade-offs, and yet it's a difficult thing to do. I mean, think about for a second the number of choices that you make that are not right versus wrong choices. God's will versus not God's will as revealed in Scripture. Breaking, sin versus righteousness. Within the field of right choices or right behaviors, there's a lot of complex and challenging decisions that people make every day. They make choices like answering questions such as, who should I marry? Now, I'm not talking about what is the type of person, the kind of person somebody should look for. Certainly we could talk about right and wrong attributes, things like that. But you're not going to read the Bible and read a name for you, right? You're not going to see, and then God gave me in the Bible a message that said, Mary, Sarah, Hester. Now, I'm glad he made it clear enough to me that I get to spend my life with, the most wonderful person that I know. But it wasn't in the Bible, like, here's who you should marry. Questions like, what career should I choose? Of course, in America, we have the luxury of kind of choosing careers that other people often don't have. And even sometimes here, there are limitations on to what degree we have that choice. But what should I do for a living? Should I go to college? What college should I go to? Should I choose to go to a trade school instead? What should my trade be? There's so many different questions. What city should I live in? Which friends should I stay in touch with? Which extracurricular activities should my children be involved in, and how many? All these are choices, right? And surely we would not say they're not meaningful choices. Those are meaningful choices, right, that people make that dramatically impact their lives. Sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. But these are serious questions. A lot of people asking the question right now, should I buy a house with interest rates being what they are? Or should I keep on renting? I bought my house a while back. Should I sell my house and capitalize? A lot of those types of questions are being asked, and they're major decisions, and they're deeply meaningful. And so, like Billy Tynes, I think, and the rest of the crew, I think we probably have moments in our lives where we're standing on the bridge, to use the last of my fishing and boating knowledge. We're standing on the bridge looking out, and perhaps we get the sense that, sure, we know what's right and what's wrong from Scripture and all of that, and yet it still looks like there's 100-foot waves coming, and we're looking around saying, that storm is coming, it's really coming. And so the question that we ask tonight then is, how can I learn to navigate life? How can I learn to navigate life? Now, that is a question I'd like to talk to you for about 7 hours about. No, that's not a simple question, right? That's an extremely important question, and it fits perfectly with the proverb that was read earlier and kind of the theme for tonight, which is, blessed is the one who finds wisdom. Blessed is the one who finds wisdom, because the Bible presents wisdom as the ability to navigate one's life, the ability to navigate life. And before we talk about what wisdom is, because I really want to not rush into this, I want to talk just for a minute about what wisdom isn't, and really talk about two extremes here. There's a lot of other things we could say, but let's just say these two. First of all, wisdom is not intelligence. Wisdom is not intellect. It is not your IQ, your ability to perform, academically. You have a high ACT score or SAT score, or you have a knack for building things or mechanical stuff or whatever the case might be. It's not about intelligence or about being good at, doing something. It's not about that. So there's a few things that are important in saying that, though. First of all, we live in a society that is hyper-focused on education, right? We're really interested in what people know. We say things like, knowledge is, you know how to fill that sentence in? Knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. The more you know, the better your life is going to be. I like that Tremper Longman, in his little book on how to read Proverbs, he points out in Proverbs 30, verses 24 through 28. And you can turn there if you want, but you'll understand it just from me reading it. Proverbs 30, 24 through 28. It says, 4 things on earth are small, but they are exceedingly wise. 4 small things that are very wise. The ants are a people not strong, yet they provide their food in the summer. The rock badgers are a people not mighty, yet they make their homes in the cliffs. The locusts have no king, yet all of them march in rank. The lizard you can take in your hands, yet it is in kings' palaces. Now, I don't know what Solomon knew about cicadas, okay? But, do you guys have cicadas around here going crazy? On the news, they told us where we live that there's 1 million cicadas per acre. I thought I might not get out of Harris County, Georgia, tonight. I thought they might attack me. Anyway, he says 4 things on the earth are small, yet are exceedingly wise. Nobody would look at an ant and say, there's a brilliant mind. Nobody would look at a grasshopper or a locust and say, that animal is a genius, right? You say, and they're gone. So it's not about how much you know. That's not what wisdom is. It doesn't hurt to know things, say that in a second, but it's not about how much information you have in your head. We are in an era, I recently read a book, it's a bit of a dated book in terms of technology, but it's still a good book, a book called Amusing Ourselves to Death. We're in an era of where technology is feeding us constant information. But that information is often pretty much useless to us. I mean, I know that there's 1 million cicadas per acre in Georgia, right? Or in Harris County, Georgia. Does that matter? It doesn't matter if there's 500,000 or 1 million, right? There's still, I can hear them and there's a lot. But as soon as I started hearing them, I said, let's see about these cicadas, We have so much information coming in, but not all information leads us to wisdom. So these creatures are exceedingly wise. Now let me say this on the other extreme, though, and maybe I'll press in a little harder on this one. Wisdom is also not anti-intellectual. It's not, let me actually put it another way if you'd rather. And this might sound weird to you. Wisdom is not common sense. Wisdom is not common sense. Now, again, hear me out here. I'm on a one-man campaign. I haven't gotten any other converts yet, but I'm on a one-man campaign against common sense, okay? And you're saying, we need more common sense. No, hold on. I'm on a campaign against common sense because certainly someone could make an idol out of their IQ, but at the same time, some can make an idol out of what they consider to be just common sense. I don't believe any minister should be hired or called to work with a church on the basis of a piece of paper that they've got hanging on their wall, however many letters are after it or anything like that. I don't think that should be a defining character or requirement of ministry. But I can tell you, it's not at Rose Hill, but I can tell you that at a different church, I have actually, before I came, people left the church. Not many, but a few people. And the basis of their leaving, I was not even there yet, was we don't really want someone to preach that has been to a university. I guess the liberal Zetfried Hardeman were getting to me, or something in their mind. That was a joke. Okay. But that's equally unhealthy, right? And that's not wise either. But let me lean into this on common sense just a little bit. You know what? I have never yet had someone come into my office at church and say, Nathan, I've been looking around. Everybody seems to have this common sense. I don't have it. I really want some. Can you help me to have some? I usually hear, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's in conversation, wherever the source is, usually you hear, I have common sense. It doesn't seem like anybody else does, right? It dawned on me not long ago that common sense really just means the sense that is common to me, what seems right to me, and what I expect everybody else ought to see too. Well, it's just common sense, that, ... What's happening in our society right now, which I don't want to get off onto this, but what's happening in our society right now is we're seeing a fragmented society, lots of different groups, lots of different ideologies and so forth, and every group has their common sense. And so when we say, well, it's just common sense that, ... they say, well, it's just common sense that that's not true, because it's just the sense common to me or to my group. The book of Proverbs teaches us in Proverbs chapter 14, verse 12. This is a verse maybe that you have memorized. There is a way that seems right to man. There is a way that seems right to man. That's what common sense is. It's what seems right to me based on my experience, based on my observation, based on the things that I've learned. And a lot of times it's right? Like a lot of times the common sense that you have, it helps protect you from stepping out in front of traffic or whatever the case might be. But he says there are ways that seem right to man, but its end is the way to death. And so he says the means look right to a person, and yet the outcome of those means is death. No, biblical wisdom is not whatever I happen to believe based on my experiences and observation and so forth about what people ought to do. It's not about ivory tower academic intelligence, and it's also not about the street smarts of the common man. That's not what wisdom is. So what is wisdom then? By the way, I did a little experiment. I asked ChatGPT, how do I navigate life? It told me this. It gave me some helpful little suggestions, by the way. I don't want to be overly critical, but it gave me the most modern/postmodern American/Western answer it could give. It says this, remember, everyone's journey is unique, so trust yourself and your instincts as you navigate the twists and turns of life. I'll be honest with you, that's not that far off of what we sometimes say in churches, right? And here, ChatGPT is saying, just trust yourself, and before long you're gonna find your way. And biblical wisdom says, don't trust yourself. Don't lean on your own understanding. Don't say, my instincts are going to find my way forward. My common sense is going to lead me to the truth. What is wisdom? Here's what I have to tell you tonight. Wisdom, the Bible, I don't think really defines wisdom. And you say, hold on a second, I know Proverbs chapter 1, verse 7, or Proverbs chapter 8. I don't think it does define it in a sentence. The book of Proverbs is all about wisdom, and it describes wisdom as instruction and discernment and knowledge and understanding and discipline, and all these different things are used to describe what it means to be wise. And yet what you find in Proverbs chapter 1, verse 7, what you find in Proverbs chapter 8, verse 13, is how to begin to be wise. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, but fools are going to despise knowledge and instruction. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is insight. The Proverbs teach us that to be wise, it begins with the fear of the Lord. And you say, what is the fear of the Lord? Well, thankfully, Proverbs answers that question. Proverbs says to us that the fear of the Lord is to act uprightly, and the fear of the Lord is to abhor what is evil. It's the idea, really, if you're wanting to press me for a definition, wisdom is really about bringing your life in submission to the ordering that God gave us, to the design of God for human individual experience and also collectively. That to be wise is to find yourself coming back into rhythm with the way that God made you to be and to live before sin and the chaos that sin brought into the world sort of dismantled everything and made it such a difficult and chaotic world that we live in. And it was our choices, right? We've chosen to sin just as much as Adam and Eve have. But the point of all of that is to say that Proverbs, rather than saying, here's how you can acquire wisdom, you just go over here and you say this prayer and you'll get wisdom. Solomon and the other writers of Proverbs later, they're really saying, you're just going to have to start, and then you're going to get more and more and more. But you got to start by realizing my life from then until now has been oriented around myself, right? I've been about me. And the fear of the Lord is to reorient one's entire life around Him. around Jesus Christ, of course, from the New Testament perspective, but to orient one's life around God. So according to Proverbs 3, as I mentioned, verses 13 through 23, the process of becoming wise leads one to a rich experience of being human, recovering what it was to be made in God's image and to function as such. It also means coming back in step with the way that God ordered the world. In Proverbs 3, 19 and 20, he literally talks about, it seems kind of random, he's talking about wisdom, and he says, I want to tell you about the fact that God made this whole world by wisdom. He made this whole world with understanding. And so when we live wise lives, when we choose to find wisdom, when we choose to pursue wisdom with the fear of the Lord, to orient our life around Jesus and to say, I want to be your apprentice, I want to follow you every step of the way and learn from you, and this is a journey, and I'm not there, but I want to become wise over the course of my life. When we do that, we actually get to recover something in us. God recovers something in us that has been distorted from sin, that we've fallen out of rhythm with how God made the world. But here's what I want to drive at. Have you noticed how kind of odd Proverbs is to read? I mean, sometimes it's kind of random. It seems random. If God said, I want to make people wise, doesn't it seem a little, like, wouldn't it be nice if it was just ordered like, here's 100 things that you need to know about money? And here's 100 things you need to know about marriage. And just give me a comprehensive study on how to be the best person I can be. That's not how Proverbs is written. I mean, he talks about money over here, then he talks about how you talk and your friends and your marriage, and you kind of go here, there, and everywhere. And there's a design. We don't have time to get into all of that. But God gives us this enormously practical book when he talks to us about wisdom. And you ask the question, why is it? Have you noticed that Proverbs, if you just sat down and read Proverbs, it's really hard to take it in. I mean, you get 1-2 line statement, and then you get another and another and another, and it's like you heard something about how to respond when you're angry, and now you're talking about how to save money, and now you're talking about the rich person that's exalted. And it's hard to take it in. That's because Proverbs is not meant to be read like that. I love the way that Timothy Keller describes Proverbs. He says they're like hard candy. And if you try to eat it at once, you might break a tooth. But if you savor it, you get the full experience of the sweetness. That's the way biblical Proverbs function. If you chew on it, don't bite down, but you get it. If you savor it, and meditate on it, you begin to understand the application of it. And this is particularly alarming to me. That perhaps we spend as individuals, I'm talking about myself, not just talking at you, perhaps we spend a majority of our time consuming information about the Bible. Let's say consuming information about Proverbs. But Proverbs are they're not going to work for us unless we take one and chew on it and chew on it and chew on it. And pretty soon we're going to realize, I think I need another one to understand this one. I mean, you're familiar, right, with how in Proverbs it's like, don't answer a fool in his folly, according to his folly. And then a little while later, it's like, answer a fool according to his folly. Proverbs are not intended to be this like, here's one proverb, you take it, and you can just take it to the bank. They're intended to be taken together and to realize, how do you know when to answer a fool, right? He said, don't do it, and then he said, do it. And you can go and you can study each passage and look at the nuances, but the point is, God is trying to teach his people not how to have their every action legislated. He's trying to teach his people how to think like him. He's trying to teach his people how to live like him. And you know what? I have a child. I have a 2-year-old child. And there's a lot of there's a lot of behavior modification that we try to do, right? He's an angel child, but you still got to say, don't touch that, don't stick your hand in that, whatever the case might be. But that's not my goal as a parent, for that to be my relationship with my son when he's 18 or when he's 25. I'd much rather give him some freedom as time goes by so that he can learn to be a human himself, so that he can learn to be free and to make real choices, right, with guidance, supervision, all of that. But life is not about, in an earthly sense, maturity is not about having every decision legislated to you. It's about learning how to think and how to live according to God's good design for human flourishing and for your own personal flourishing as well. So here's the good news, the bad news. Let me give you the bad news first, then I'll give you the good news. The bad news is that Proverbs 3:13 says, "Blessed is the one who finds wisdom." But wisdom isn't enough. Proverbs goes on to list all the blessings. It's going to be like a tree of life, replenishment for your bones, nourishment for your body, better than riches and gold, all that. But it's not enough. Because Proverbs tell us about how to live according to God's good design. But you're familiar, I think, with the fact that there's a book called Job and Psalms and Ecclesiastes, and they're all surrounding the book of Proverbs. And they're all testifying to the reality that we don't live according to God's good design, and we've caused some problems that even trying to live according to God's good design can't solve. And so Solomon says, even when I tried to be a really moral person, it was vanity, a chasing after the wind. Pointless, he said. In fact, he said, I came to hate my life when I tried to really do it well. When I tried to follow God, when I tried to go after women, and when I tried to go after wealth, and I tried it all, and I hated my life because of it. You can begin to possess the kind of wisdom that allows you to navigate not only right and wrong, but also better and best. But it won't be enough for you. It won't be enough to lead you to that ultimate joy that your heart desperately needs, that ultimate hope that transcends death itself. There's a reason that we see in Scripture these witnesses to the chaos that have come into our world because of sin. And we read the book of Romans, and quoting from the Psalms, there's nobody who does what is righteous, not even one. Everybody's turned aside to his or her own way. I was talking with somebody earlier this week or last week about some things going on in their life, and he was referring to himself as being bad and me as being good, and saying, I know people that are good see things one way, people that are bad see things kind of another way. And he was basically saying, I wish I was good like you. And I told him, I said, I don't think it's so much that you're bad and I'm good. I think I'm bad too. I think without Jesus in my life, I'm bad. That's what the Bible says. That whether, and I have my moments now, right? But you take Christ out of the equation, and there's nobody, Paul says, that is righteous. Nobody that actually can fully commit to this way of living in this world. So wisdom isn't enough. And now here's the good news. Wisdom is enough. In John chapter 1, I thought I had to be done at 7:45 because that's when I have to be done back home. I'm doing really good on time, okay. By that I mean I have like 20 more minutes, but I'm going to cut it down a little bit to still get you out on time. In John chapter 1, it strikes me that John opens his gospel in a really peculiar way, right? In the beginning was the Word. What? I mean, we just got done with Matthew, Mark, and Luke and them telling us about the beginning of the gospel of the Son of God, and John the Baptist comes, the kingdom's being proclaimed, boom, Jesus on the scene. In the beginning, John says, let me take you back on the timeline to day one. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And he goes on to talk about how by this Word, all things that have been made were made, and without Him, nothing that has been made that has been made. In the beginning was the Word. There have been debates among biblical scholars about basically, is that mainly a Greek philosophy or mainly talking about back in the Hebrew Bible and scriptures and stuff. But at the end, they kind of all come to the same place, which is to say that John is positioning Jesus as the fundamental principle that undergirds and upholds this entire world. If you think about what Hebrews chapter 1 says, starting in verse 1 all the way through verse 4. But in Hebrews chapter 1, the author of Hebrews is going to tell us that Jesus, by the word of His power, He upholds the universe. Paul says in Colossians that all things are held together in Him. Jesus, in John chapter 1, He is this ordering principle, this fundamental principle, I dare say we could say this wisdom that orders the universe itself. And because of that, I want to suggest to you today that wisdom is not first a way of life. It is a way of life. It is a way of navigating life. But wisdom is not first a way of life. Wisdom is first and foremost a person to be followed. A person to be followed. When in Mark chapter 6, verse 2, Jesus is there and He's teaching in the synagogue and he's doing some healings and things and all that, but He's there and he's teaching them. And the people are wondering about Him. I love some of the ways that the crowd talks about Jesus. And they're saying, this guy teaches like he has authority, not as our scribes and our Pharisees do. But somebody in the crowd starts to wonder about Jesus. It doesn't say somebody, it just says, here's what they were asking. Where did this wisdom come from? You see, the people that were listening to Jesus, they realized that there was a qualitative difference between the wisdom of the teachings of Jesus and anything they had ever heard before. Now listen, they had heard Proverbs. They agreed with Proverbs. They loved Proverbs. So did Jesus. But they said, where did this wisdom come from? Because this is that, but even deeper. This is that, but in a way that is turning things upside down. And Paul, in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, he is going to impress upon us that the ultimate wisdom of God has come in Christ. And in the cross of Christ, we see, as followers of Jesus, the power of God for salvation. But the world sees, on the one hand, folly. It's ridiculous to believe in this Jesus and God and everything, right? The Gentile world says it's foolishness. And then he says to another group, it's scandalous. How dare you say that this crucified man offers full pardon to the worst sinners? But Paul says to us, He is the power of God and the wisdom of the ages. Far from being a good moral teacher that came into our life to say, maybe we could just tweak a couple of little things here about how we're doing ethics, how we're doing morality. If we could just correct a few little missteps here. Jesus came to completely invert what we thought we knew about what life was about. You might remember in Matthew 20 through 28, Jesus is approached by a couple of apostles and their mother. And she comes up to him. Might have been a relative of Jesus. There's some question about that. But she comes up to Jesus and she says, it would be really nice if my two sons could sit, one at the right and one at the left when you come into your kingdom. Then he says, well, you don't really know what you're asking. But then after they've been sent away, the other 10, were furious when they heard about what these two had asked Jesus. And so the 12 are bickering among themselves. I don't know if you've seen the Chosen series or not, but in the Chosen, they portray that quite a bit, of the disciples kind of at odds with each other. And it's a very good thing, I think, to see that played out, because you're realizing, yeah, this could be pretty tense sometimes. We've got a tax collector, a guy who's working for Rome, and we've got a zealot who literally wants to overthrow Rome. I'm guessing that made for an interesting dinner conversation. You see the fury in their hearts toward one another, and I love Jesus' words when he tells them, you know how the Gentile rulers lord over their authority. They look at others and they say, well, I'm in charge and this is how it's going to be. And Jesus says, it shall not be so among you. And the apostles' lives are a testimony to the fact that in following Jesus, in the Jesus way, if you want to think of it in those terminologies, in following their Messiah, who would become their king, filled with the Holy Spirit, empowered by God, you see them have this radical transformation where the church gathers together in Acts chapter 15. Paul's on the scene now and everything, and Paul's going to go do mission work, and they're going to task Paul and say, we need you. And he talks about this in Galatians 2 as well, but he said, we just need you to remember the poor. And Paul says, that was the very thing I was eager to do. That was the thing I was eager to do. Jesus comes and he turns our way of thinking upside down. And only when you have first come to wisdom himself can you actually begin to experience what it means to have the wisdom that Proverbs offers. Because everything that the Proverbs are describing ultimately find their fullest and purest revelation in Jesus Christ. And so when I'm thinking about how to navigate life and how to be blessed, I'm thinking about the voice of Jesus in John chapter 10, when he's talking about his sheep. The sheep that he has that hear his voice. The sheep that he says, there's a robber that comes, a thief that comes to break in and to kill and to steal. But I have come that they might have life and have it to the fullest, have it abundantly. My guess is that probably me and you, maybe you're in a season like this right now. I don't know your story, obviously. But maybe you're in a season of life where you're looking at a 100-foot wave coming. The invitation is just a couple minutes away. Okay, don't get there quite yet. Okay, maybe it used to be in the old days. I get distracted sometimes. It used to be in the old days. You would start hearing the songbooks coming out. Did people not do that? When the invitation song was about to come, the whole room began to turn pages. You guys are great Christians. You didn't try to wrap it up even 10 seconds early. Okay, wow, I've really derailed this. In your life, it might be you're sitting on the boat of the ship of your life, and you're looking out and you're seeing those 100-foot waves. And the waves that are facing you are not right and wrong choices. It's not like, am I going to have a affair or not? That's not the choice that you're facing. The choice is you have sickness in your life and you don't know what to do about it. The choice is you have a family member that's not living the way that they should and you don't know what to do about it. The choice is you're thinking about changing your career, but it's really scary, but you think it's going to be worth it because it's going to mean X, Y, Z for you, and you're trying to decide, what should I do? And I have good news and I have bad news for you again tonight. And the bad news is you're not going to be able to open that Bible up and say, I have now received the epiphany. I know exactly what to do. You're not going to get that. Apparently, God doesn't think you need that. Apparently, God doesn't think you need that. Not to get to where he's trying to lead you. Because what God is fundamentally concerned with is not whether or not every moment of your life works out just the way that it optimally could. What he's most concerned about is whether your heart will be formed and shaped in the way of Christ in a way that is most optimal. In 2 Corinthians chapter 3, Paul says, the whole section is so rich, but Paul says that we, beholding the glory of the Lord in the face of Jesus Christ with unveiled face, are being transformed from one degree of glory to another according to the same image. And all this is from the Spirit of the Lord. And where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. Paul says to us, Proverbs says to us, come and meet the person of Jesus and walk his way and say to yourself, as maybe cliche as it might be, knowing what I know about God, knowing what I know about right and wrong, knowing the examples that I have seen in Scripture, and knowing the information that has been imparted to me through spiritual mentors and all of that, knowing what I know, how do I navigate a choice where I don't know? And that activity is what shapes our character. Because we have to say, I can't trust myself here. I've got to rely on the Lord and His guidance. And one of the most liberating things that I have heard recently about that was from a sermon on Proverbs where the person said, it's important to remember that wisdom, knowledge, guidance is not just something God gives to you, it's something God does to you. Sometimes you make the choice. Sometimes you don't get the epiphany, but you make the choice based on all you know, and you say, Lord, help me, I'm leaning on you, I'm turning to you. Here's the choice that I think is what is spiritually best for me and my family. And sometimes God just tears down every, door in the way, and you just go right on down that path. And sometimes you're like Paul, who's trying to go into a city, and God's just like, no, you're not going to go in there, right? You're going to go over here, actually. Sometimes you're going to be guided by God in a little bit more difficult way, in a little bit more bumpy path, sometimes a very bumpy path, sometimes the 100-foot waves. But tonight, I'm really here to tell you one thing. I only have ever met one person who can calm the perfect storm. And it's only in following Him that you can find hope, but more importantly tonight, that you can find the wisdom to begin to learn to navigate life. And you will fall down, and you have, and I have, but it's not so much can you be perfect in your decisions, it's can you continually give your decisions to the Lord and allow Him to guide you, not just in the giving you information, but in the doing, that He guides you as you go. And if you're here tonight and you're facing that perfect storm in your life, and you're in need of the wisdom that God both gives and does, and you're maybe even in need of knowing Jesus Christ, wisdom Himself, right? Maybe you're here and you don't actually know Jesus and you want to follow Him, because you heard what I said, that if you're not following the person wisdom, then, the do this with your money and do this with your marriage, that's not going to lead to what is the ultimately abundant life that Jesus provides. And if you're here tonight and you need that life, and you're looking at the storm and say, Lord, help me. We want to offer you the invitation to come. Perhaps you're ready to be immersed into Christ. You're ready to repent, to orient your life around Him. I want to give you the opportunity to come forward now as we stand and sing.